Well, with the UK's tough new immigration laws having finally cleared Parliament and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak promising to start deporting asylum seekers within weeks, Ireland is experiencing an unprecedented surge in migration from Britain. As asylum seekers flee the UK government's threat to fly them to Rwanda with limited rights of appeal, many are leaving Britain, we are told, and entering the Republic of Ireland by crossing the checks-free border with its UK neighbour, Northern Ireland. Officials in Ireland warn that asylum cases inherited from Britain will top 20,000 in Ireland this year alone. Some government lawmakers in Dublin are laying the blame on the Prime Minister Sunak for treating Ireland's difficulty as England's opportunity. To discuss this now, I'm joined by Irish historian, author and a good friend of mine, Ruth Dudley Edwards. Ruth, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming in. So, Ruth, I mean, you've written about this over this past week. You had a piece in The Telegraph. Ireland has made its bed with the EU. It must lie in it. What did you mean by that?
I meant that it decided to surrender all its sovereignty to the EU.
Yeah.
And it is now helpless. And it also absolutely insisted on all post-Brexit negotiations that there should be no hard border.
Yeah. And of course, there is, as Theresa Villiers was saying earlier on when she was on with Camilla this morning, that there's a certain irony around all of this as well, because at the time of the Brexit negotiations, when I was indeed First Minister of Northern Ireland, we were told, no, Ireland can't negotiate with the UK, they have to negotiate with the European Union. And now when the Prime Minister says that in relation to migration, he's, oh, that's terrible.
I know. They are not being terribly logical about this. I mean, Ireland is the country I come from.
Sure.
And I have quite a lot of loyalty to it, but I have a lot of loyalty to this country too.
Yeah.
And I like to, I will shout for Ireland at cricket, but I'll shout for England at rugby.
Yes, yes.
So I try to be fair. But the fact of the matter is, they talk about a century of seeking sovereignty from the big bully next door.
Yes.
They got it. And they didn't really enjoy it. So they handed it over to the EU. So now they are desperately contradicting themselves. Yeah. Because the EU agreed with them. The EU completely picked up the Irish.
Facilitated them, actually.
Facilitated. And they don't know what to say. It wasn't supposed to be like that. See, if my countrymen have a failing, and they, like all of us, they have many, one of them is that they don't think things through. They have no interest in thinking things through. I'm a great fan of the law of unintended consequences. And there should have been people on the diplomatic side and the political side saying, this could prove to be bad for us. But no, we will be throwing our lot with the EU, and they think we're the favoured country of the EU and it's all going to be fine. And now it isn't all fine.
Well, you and I both know that it wasn't always like that. And actually, before Leo Varadkar became the Taoiseach, that there was actually conversations happening between Enda Kenny and ourselves in Northern Ireland to try and make things work after Brexit. Now, don't get me wrong, Enda was totally vehemently opposed to Brexit, but when it happened, he accepted that it had happened and there was a need to find solutions for the island of Ireland. But when Leo Varadkar came in, that all changed, of course, and then it was, no, everything has to be European, despite the fact, Ruth, and our listeners and our viewers may not realise this, there is a common travel area between the whole of the island of Ireland and the mainland.
That's absolutely true. And I think people don't realise how dependent Ireland is on England for other reasons, pragmatic reasons, like in security.
Sure.
The Irish have not thought through security. The Russians are sniffing round. The Russians are sniffing round the undersea cables. And the Irish are saying there's no problem. They don't have a defence force any better than having you and me, really. Absolutely hopeless. And they've been dependent on the RAF, but they haven't talked about it.
And when that's raised, of course, it's dismissed.
Absolutely. But
as well.
It's absolutely key. Ireland has left themselves vulnerable. And they've done the same thing with the border.
Yeah.
And they haven't a clue what to do, so there's massive panic.
And that panic, part of that panic, Ruth, was the announcement, which was then rolled back on, that they were going to send 100 guards to man a border that's over 300-odd miles long to stop these migrants coming over the border. How they were going to do that is another question, that has to be said. Were they going to get on the buses on the road from Belfast to Dublin and check who looked like a migrant? You know, it's mad stuff.
Except that they don't approve of racial profiling.
Correct.
So they tie themselves up with all sorts of EU legislation and human rights stuff and everything else, which leaves them no capacity to do anything off their own bat, while we at least have capacity to do things off our own bat because of Brexit.
And tell me, Ruth, I mean, people are saying this is because of the Rwanda legislation. I happen to believe that this was happening long before the Rwanda legislation. And actually, our correspondent in Northern Ireland, Dougie Beattie, has been looking at this now for nearly a year, when there were riots happening in Dublin around migrants coming into estates there. But is this an easy way to blame the Brits, as it were, for what's happening in Ireland?
The Brits are therefore to be blamed. They always were. But the thing is, again, they didn't think of what might happen on the immigration front, because self-image is very important. Virtue signalling. Sure. We're a great virtue signalling nation. So quite genuinely, they opened their arms to the Ukrainians. Come on in, everybody. It'll be fine. It'll be grand. And then you got 100,000 of them. Ireland is a very small country and it couldn't cope. And then Somalians started to come. And then Afghanis started to come. And then nobody had made any arrangements for sufficient accommodation. So panic again.
Yeah. And do you think part of the plea to Ukrainians to come and stay with us was because they felt guilty that they were a neutral country, so they weren't offering any military help, but here we are offering humanitarian help, come and stay with us?
I think there's a part of that. That is quite a part of it. They're also naturally generous.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, and they, as I say, they don't think things through.
People want to be welcoming, and you and I both know that, but you have to think about the logistics of this. And when you place somebody from Africa or from a far-flung country into the middle of nowhere, let's face it, we have plenty of places in the middle of nowhere in Northern Ireland as well as in the Republic of Ireland. It's difficult for the refugees as well, isn't it?
Yes, it's terrible for the refugees.
Yeah.
They're petrified, and they're the ones I keep thinking of through all this.
Yes.
I mean, wouldn't you, in their position, rush over the nearest border if it was going to yield you anything?
Yeah.
Well,
it reminds me of an interview that Dougie Beattie did in Belfast with an African migrant, and who said he landed in Belfast not knowing anything about the history of the peace walls or anything around the divisions in Northern Ireland. And then he said he was caught in the middle of it, and it was quite scary for him, actually.
Yes, that is... I don't know how they're going to get out of this, except that it's got to be done the bilateral negotiations.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, there is this tendency for the UK to say, well, here you go, you told us you couldn't work with us on the Brexit negotiations, that it had to be through the European Union. It's very easy to do that, but presumably the UK will want to try and find a solution as well as Ireland.
Well, actually, in fairness, Rishi Sunak was saying that the day before an election.
Yeah.
So he's talking big.
Yeah.
And the Irish are talking big because they've got elections on the 7th of June.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to be talking most sense in those circumstances.
Yeah.
I think it'll be OK behind the scenes.
That's what I was going to say. You would hope that officials behind the scenes will be trying to work out a solution to this.
I would. And if Micheál Martin, who is the deputy, who was Taoiseach, if he's more or less in charge of it, I have faith in him.
Yes.
He's very sensible.
Yes, of course, for our viewers and listeners, we've got a new Taoiseach now, so he will probably be wanting to make his mark as well, because Sinn Féin are coming behind. And they have an interesting view on all of this, have they not, Ruth?
Sinn Féin have no problem in dropping all their policies.
Yeah.
By simply saying, that wasn't what I said. What I meant was the opposite. So that's what they're doing there.
Isn't it incredible, though, that a party that was incredibly anti-Europe before the referendum here in the UK then turned on their tail and said, no, we love Europe now. And everything's good about it. And now Mary Lou McDonald's saying that she wasn't actually in favour of an open border.
Which is untrue. Completely untrue.
Yeah.
Completely untrue. But she has no problem in adjusting history.
Yeah.
To suit her.
I think the concern of other politicians, including the government in Ireland, would be how can they do that? But they seem to get away with that, and they seem to be able to do that, and no problem.
Yes. I mean, Sinn Féin are the really tricky people in all this. The only thing they care about is getting power. They have no interest in anything else. So the notion that they'll be happy, that they will really want the two countries to get on better,
yes,
isn't part of it.
Yes.
This is all playing a game.
Yes.
for Sinn Féin to be in
Yes.
power.
It's like SNP in Scotland, Sinn Féin in Ireland, both north and south.
But let's be cheerful. Look what happened to the SNP.
Yes, there are reasons to be cheerful.
There certainly are.
Yes. Ruth, it's always wonderful to have you in. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming in
Arlie.
to have a conversation about this, which is a complicated matter, but hopefully we've helped with it today. Thank you to Ruth Dudley Edwards.